News from Paris is that the man who tried to enter the police station with a knife and perhaps an explosive vest has been shot dead by the police. Now, to the UK's relationship with Saudi Arabia, because the government has been criticised for failing to condemn directly the execution of a prominent Shia cleric at the weekend as part of a mass execution of 47 alleged terrorists. Instead, a junior Foreign Office minister expressed, quote, disappointment with the executions. The UK-Saudi relationship was dismissed as sycophantic by the Lib Dem leader Tim Farron, and Labour called for an end to any judicial cooperation with Riyadh. Let's talk now to Jane Kinnamont from Chatham House. Jane, how important is the British relationship to Britain with Saudi Arabia?
It's an important trade partner and also an important partner in counter-terrorism and intelligence sharing. All this in a context of a Middle East where many of the traditional governments have been massively weakened over the past few years, and the Gulf governments are some of the few still standing.
And in this standoff now between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we've learned this morning, at least the Iranians are claiming that their diplomatic quarters in the Yemen has been bombed by Saudi jets. They're both fighting a proxy war in Yemen, the Iranians and the Saudis. Does Britain have a side? If other Saudis are allies in this and Iran not?
Britain has traditionally been much closer to Saudi Arabia, but it is trying now to balance that relationship more with Iran, even as both countries abuse human rights and are stepping up the use of the death penalty. But one of the reasons that Saudi Arabia is currently quite on the defensive is that it has a fear that its Western allies are on the brink of abandoning it in favour of Iran. That fear is misplaced and overstated, but in Riyadh, it's very real.
Jane Kinnamont of Chatham House, thank you for joining us this morning. We're joined now by the Conservative MP and the member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Daniel Kaczynski, and the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage, is still with us. Nigel Farage, you've talked about Britain it should, quote, rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia. What does that mean?
Well, we're always saying that Saudi Arabia are great friends of ours and great trading partners, and indeed we do a lot of trade with them. But it's very interesting. If you talk to any expert on the growth of jihadism, the growth of extremism, whether it's in this country or indeed across the rest of Europe, every single independent expert will say that actually the big change was large amounts of Saudi money coming into the mosques, pushing an interpretation of the Quran that actually is very extreme indeed. And I just look at what's been happening in Syria and Iraq and Saudi Arabia.
I understand all
refusing
that.
to take a so all I'm saying
but that's
is,
the case for a rethink. I understand that, and the
Yeah.
financing of a Wahhabi form of Islam. I get all that.
Yeah.
That's the case for. But what would a rethink mean?
Well, a rethink would mean that we would actually, I think, have to make sure that if Saudi money is coming into British mosques and funding extremism, that it would have to be declared. We need some transparency for Saudi money.
But Saudi money is coming into British mosques.
Yes,
we know that already.
Yeah, we know that, but we don't know the extent of it or the amount of it, and I think there needs to be a sort of proper transparency register.
Should we stop selling them arms?
I wouldn't stop selling them arms because, but I mean,
so not that much of a rethink.
If there was a breakdown of diplomatic relations that led to us selling them fewer arms, that frankly would be a price worth paying. We go on pretending these are our best chums in the Middle East, and I'm not sure they are.
Should we be rethinking our relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Certainly not. We've had an extremely good relationship with Saudi Arabia for decades. Our royal families have a very good working relationship. And
is that something to boast about?
It is, absolutely. It is in our strategic interest to be very close to Saudi Arabia.
No, I understand the strategic interest, but is it something to boast about that our royal family should be close to a regime which has done so many executions recently that it's run out of trained beheaders?
Well, I think there are 47 countries in the world that have killings of people who have been convicted for crimes of this nature. So Saudi Arabia is not the only country. But it's very important...
No, but it's our ally.
It's very important that we continue to engage with Saudi Arabia to make representations when we disagree with them, as we do on the regular basis. We can't just stop relations with them, as Jeremy Corbyn would have us do, and have no contact with them. When we go to Saudi Arabia, we make very strong representations on the things that we disagree with them.
And what difference has that made?
Well, when I first went to Saudi Arabia, there were no women, for example, in the Shura Council. Now that 30% of their representatives are women, women have now been able to take part in elections.
They still can't drive.
Well, it's moving at a slow pace.
What evidence is there that we have played any role in that?
Well, because I think the Saudis are interested in having a close relationship with the United Kingdom.
What evidence
when we go
is
to
there
Saudi-
anything that we've asked on women's rights, and I have no evidence that we've asked for very much, has played a role in that?
It's that contact that we have with NGOs and human rights organizations when we go to Saudi. When we go to Saudi, we leave our minders behind at one stage and we go and engage with women's rights organizations directly, one-to-one. And they get a lot of comfort from the fact that British politicians are coming out there to support them and help them to campaign for their rights.
So why are they not?
We may be doing our bit for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. Fine. But what about the fact that the Saudis have refused to take a single refugee or migrant from Iraq or Syria, and yet are going to be funding 200 mosques in Germany? Would you disagree with the experts that they have been funding extremism in British mosques? Isn't it time we said no? Perhaps the Saudi money coming into our mosques at all? Do you not
Okay,
accept?
let him answer.
Do you not accept that there is a damage being done to our society by Saudi extremism?
Mr. Kaczynski.
Well, whether it's Saudi, whether it's UAE, or whether it's Kuwait, their attitude is that they're very worried about allowing President Assad to get away with ethnically cleansing his country of his opponents, and that is why they, like us, are putting a lot of money into camps.
Doesn't Saudi Arabia cleanse its opponents as well?
No.
It doesn't?
Saudi Arabia...
But it's just executed 47 of them.
And those 47 people, the Saudis say, were convicted by an independent judiciary, by 15 judges, that they were involved in terrorist acts. We also eliminate opponents worldwide who are involved in terrorist acts.
I'm afraid we've
because we haven't answered the question, have we?
I must explain to you because we overran on the Trident discussion with Mr. Livingston and Julian Lewis. I'm sorry, we've run out of time, but we'll come back to this in the weeks to come. I thank you both for being with us.
Now.